Welcome back. This is the Lady Macbeth of Sean. Love is supposed to be a symbol of purity and innocence. Although Catherine is sold to the nobleman Lister, she still has high expectations of her husband whom she has never met. She deluded herself that she could find love in her husband, and her heart was very happy even for a simple wedding. She gently swept her curious eyes over the man beside her, but quickly lowered them again. She was both shy and expectant. The maid who changed Catherine's clothes inquired about the woman who was about to have her wedding night, and there was a faint joy between the master and the maid. But to his surprise, Rist not only confronted with indifference, but also humiliated Catherine in the wedding month. He made his beautiful wife take off her clothes and stand naked by the bed without being allowed to go to bed. Even in the face of the male's own physical needs, Rist was unwilling to touch the woman who disgusted him. It turned out that the husband was a weak and thoughtless victim of a feudal family, who could not see Catherine from the bottom of his heart and agreed to marry solely because he did not dare to rebel against his own father. In Rist's mind, Catherine is just a plaything bought by her father. His expressionless look struck Catherine deeply. The great physical and mental exhaustion broke Catherine's heart, and the seeds of evil sprouted. The life of a nobleman is always a complicated ritual. In the morning, the maid always arrives as scheduled, washing, changing clothes, eating, all the steps under the arrangement of the maid Anna in an orderly manner, but also silently destroyed the woman's spirit. Decency and decency are the basic qualities of a nobleman, so Catherine had to endure a day-long life of sitting in the living room. Despite the delicious food, gorgeous clothes and attentive servants, Catherine remained like a delicate doll in a room without her own consciousness and soul in this boring room. The father-in-law still dislikes his daughter-in-law very much. He often hurt the young girl with cold words and even ignored her greetings. Catherine's self-esteem was shattered to pieces. The beautiful castle was like a big prison for Catherine, binding her life and imprisoning her soul. Life was like a pool of stagnant water, leaving the vivacious Catherine breathless by nature. Until one day her husband and father-in-law had to go to a coal mine that had an accident, and Catherine could finally have a few days of relaxation. She opened the door of the room where she was confined and stood on the beach against the wind, listening to the sound of the howling wind and quietly looking into the distance. The wind blew her hair. At this moment she no longer had to wear a disgusting hairstyle, just be herself. In the meantime, Catherine was in charge of the household during her husband's absence. When a couple of maids bully Anna, Catherine goes up to stop them, but everyone else is very obedient, except Saba, who doesn't give. Her face and even speaks sarcastically, scaring Catherine into a hasty escape. But surprisingly, the beautiful young woman caught Saba's eye and tugged at his heart. Late that night, Saba took the opportunity to come to the lonely Catherine. He only gently tried to get Catherine. After this exciting experience, Catherine's heart began to stir. She fell in love with the feeling and even more with the servant Saba. His presence gives a touch of life to Catherine's dull life. They enjoy the flowers in the beautiful manner, and their lovemaking takes over the whole life. The two of them even ignore the ethics, unconcealed in front of the underlings to make love. Catherine's lost love is found. They sat in the open and whispered, and the stronger the wind, the tighter they hugged, and even recited poetry. Such a day makes Catherine happy. But there comes a time when things are exposed, and the story still reaches Anna's father-in-law, who rushes home to prepare to deal with the two. Too long tied up makes you restless. This was a sarcastic remark made to Catherine by her father-in-law. Yes, tied for too long, this youthful and delicate little girl has long ceased to be restless. Although the servant Saba was severely punished, not only physically, but also confined to the hut and not allowed to go out. Catherine came to the front of the house, but could not save her lover. The father-in-law scolded Catherine in strong words and said that her value was only to carry on the family line and not to think too highly of herself. She was just a reproductive tool. Catherine lost her usual silence and sarcastically said that it was her husband's incompetence that prevented her from having children. The father-in-law was furious and gave the slut in his eyes a resounding slap in the face. The long repression finally made Catherine, who had hidden her malice in her heart, burst out. She could not bear to live without Saba, and whoever stood in the way of her search for love had to die. So she secretly killed her father-in-law with poisonous mushrooms. Compared to the maid Anna's screaming panic, Catherine is surprisingly calm and restrained. Anna can no longer speak because of the shock and injury to the throat. Without the hindrance of her father-in-law, the two resumed their previous affair. Until late one night, Catherine heard a movement outside the door. She saw her husband's horse, realized that Rist had returned, and hurriedly told her lover to hide in other places. Due to panic, Seba's belt was still discovered by her husband. He confronted Catherine. Finally, the woman burst out completely. She pulled her unclothed lover to her husband regardless. Rist could not bear the humiliation and wrestled with Seba. Faced with the revelation, Catherine seemed to be mad. She picked up a stick and hit her husband hard, ending his life. At this time, Catherine's face is not a trace of remorse. There is only the horror of killing without blinking. Faced with Catherine's 2 killings, Seba's heart finally changed and he felt that Catherine was no longer beautiful. Who would fall in love with a murderous executioner? He knew he no longer loved the woman in front of him. It was thought that without her husband and father-in-law in the way, Catherine would have access to the castle's property. So she indulged in cheating with Seba, and even blatantly let Seba sit at the table to eat in his noble costume. In this castle, she no longer needs to fear the authority of her husband and father-in-law. It was as if she was the queen of this castle in charge of everything. But it did not last long. Halfway out, a bastard son Teddy. Since they had the papers to inherit the property and hold everything in this castle, Seba went back to the dark and damp room of the underlings. That day Catherine came to Seba, wanting to get Teddy killed to inherit the property herself. After hearing of her plan, Seba's pent-up emotions finally exploded and he was unwilling to touch this horrible woman again. Seeing the cold attitude of her lover, Catherine did not reflect on herself at all. Because she was pregnant. She wanted to have a good life with Seba, and the only obstacle standing in her way was Teddy. She was determined to get rid of this scourge. Eventually Seba compromised. Late one night, a sleeping Teddy does not realize that danger is closing in on him. Catherine picks up a pillow and together with Seba covers the still young child to death. Catherine, who had killed Teddy, sat in her chair reflecting on this frightening act, and tears slipped down her face. Her tears were like the last vestiges of her conscience dying. Because for Catherine, she loves this young child. If not hindered herself and Seba, she will definitely spoil Teddy a million times. Finally, the bruises on Teddy's legs were discovered by the doctor, who believed that Teddy had been murdered. The police set up a special team to deal with the incident. Due to strong internal condemnation, Seba is ready to confess all this to the police. In front of Catherine, he begins to reveal the cause and effect of the incident, even the deaths of both the father and son of the estate. He sarcastically accused Anna of being a terrible woman is no conscience of the devil. And Anna, who was sitting in her seat, quietly listened to her lover's prosecution and experienced the waves of her heart. She holds back this pain and begins her hypocritical performance. She told the police that it was all a conspiracy by Seba, that the real cheater was Anna and Seba, that she loved Teddy very much, and that she could never do something as cruel as killing her child. The tearful Catherine has gained the sympathy of the police. Anna can no longer speak, naturally cannot justify themselves. At the same time their status is inferior, the police easily believed Catherine's lies. The car had started, Seba was lying in the prison car covered with wretchedness. His eyes were empty, wondering if he thought it was all like a dream, and finally his conscience was awakened. Catherine, however, was on her way to hell more and more all-consuming, and her mood was not affected in the slightest. Catherine enjoys this dreary life in solitude and happiness, finally aggravating her inner perversion and distortion in one disappointment after another. She is still exquisitely made up and gorgeously dressed, sitting quietly at the table enjoying her life as a noble woman. But now the difference is that Catherine's eyes no longer have the spirit and goodness, only the eyes full of empty. Because her soul has been emptied. She quietly strokes her slightly bulging belly and lives alone in the world with her hatred for the world. The film is inspired by Shakespeare's work Macbeth. The end.